Have you ever imagined what it was like to live among the tribes of ancient China? Maybe the image that comes to mind is one of dense forests and warrior tribes in far-off lands like the Amazon. But the truth is, thousands of years ago, China also had its own warrior communities, just as fascinating as any other historical group we know. Long before becoming the empire we recognize today, Chinese territory was a vibrant mosaic of cultures, with hundreds of unique ethnic groups, each with its own customs and way of life. In the east, for example, there was a tribe led by the legendary Tai Hao, also known as Fu Shi. To the north and west, the Rong and Di tribes occupied vast areas. Meanwhile, in the northern regions, the ancestors of the feared Xiongnu and Xianbei emerged, renowned for their unmatched combat skills and resilience. However, one tribe stood out above all the others. Led by the iconic Huangdi, known as the Yellow Emperor, they had an ambitious goal: to conquer the vast central plains and unify that fragmented land. Since ancient times, old tribes have fascinated us, especially because of how their leaders and traditions shaped their identities. It was common for groups to take names inspired by their leaders, meaning the tribe's name could change with new leadership. A particularly interesting example is the Huangdi tribe, whose name carries a symbolic connection to the bear totem, reflecting their roots in the Zhou Mountains in northwest China. Initially, they were a nomadic people who gradually migrated to the Central Plains. There, they embraced a vigorous lifestyle based on gathering and livestock farming. Their journey was marked by challenges and victories, like defeating the Yan tribe and driving out the 9 Chuli tribes. These events cemented their position in the heart of China and became legends, filling the collective imagination with tales of courage and nearly superhuman feats. Meanwhile, the culture flourishing along the Yangtze River was thriving. Around 5,000 years ago, the valleys of this region became home to the first rice cultivators, represented by communities like the Hemudu and Magyabong tribes. Over time, these societies gave rise to the Liangzhu culture, which not only preserved but also expanded the agricultural and cultural knowledge inherited from the Longshan traditions of China's Central Plains. Fast forward to the 9th century BCE, northern tribes like the Guwu and Yue began to deeply intertwine with Chinese cultural and political patterns. This period of integration was marked by a rich exchange of influences, leading these tribes to master the Chinese language and adapt to the complexities of local politics. This process of adaptation brought significant military advancements, with innovative strategies that propelled their societies to new heights. Strategically positioned among swamps and waterways, these tribes excelled in shipbuilding and military technology, often celebrated in epic songs. They also gained fame for their expertise in metallurgy and advanced manufacturing techniques. Over the years, the descendants of these ancient tribes gained influence and prominence in Chinese politics. They not only led memorable military campaigns, such as those against the state of Chu, but also secured their place in history. One of the most iconic conflicts was the rivalry between the states of Wu and Yue, which lasted for 3 decades. This feud ended with Yue's victory, led by King Gu Jian over Wu. Later, when Qin Shi Huangdi rose to power and unified China, the territories of Wu and Yue were incorporated into the vast Qin Empire, which expanded all the way to the Guangdong region. With this annexation came the establishment of administrative districts, and local leaders became part of the centralized system, submitting to Qin rule. During the Han Dynasty, the territory formerly known as Yue was divided into Non-Yue in the south and Min-Yue in the southeast. Non-Yue enjoyed a brief moment of prominence under the leadership of Zhou Tuo, before it was once again absorbed into the Han Dynasty's power. These events marked another stage in the expansion of Chinese influence over local cultures, leaving a legacy of integration and conquest that shaped the nation's identity. Over centuries, like the slow movement of waves shaping the coastline, Chinese settlers began to establish themselves in the lands once occupied by the Yue. This process wasn't abrupt or marked by violent conflict. Instead, it was gradual, pushing the Yue into more remote areas, often less fertile and surrounded by mountains. Unlike the nomadic Xiongnu and Xianbei warriors who often threatened the Chinese Empire, the Yue posed little danger. They were a peaceful people, devoted to farming and the simplicity of rural life. While the women tended rice paddies, the men prepared the land, following a routine deeply connected to nature's rhythms. Over time, many Yue became part of the cultural fabric of China, contributing to the rich diversity that defines the country today. A significant portion of their descendants now live in regions like Zhejiang and Guangdong, fully integrated into the local culture. However, some groups held tightly to their ancestral traditions, particularly those tied to the Tai Kadai peoples, such as the Shan, Muang, Dai, and Zhuang. Determined to protect their identity, some even migrated to more distant lands inhabited by Mon Khmer communities, seeking to escape the direct influence of the Chinese Empire. Even so, the essence of their origins lives on, reflected in their practices, languages, and customs that have endured through generations. The Shaolin warrior monks have always sparked fascination, blending the contemplative focus of Zen with the intensity of martial arts, a combination that has endured through the centuries. While their fame has been amplified by action films and stars like Jackie Chan, the legacy of Shaolin goes far beyond what Hollywood portrays. It's a story of discipline, spirituality, and mental strength. Throughout history, the monks developed exceptional martial arts skills that go beyond self-defense. For them, every movement, every technique is a form of meditation in motion, a quest for harmony between body and mind. Those awe-inspiring feats of breaking bricks or wood aren't just displays of physical strength. They're the result of years of practice, unwavering discipline, and extraordinary mental control. These achievements embody the essence of Zen, a state of complete awareness and mastery over oneself. The legend of the Shaolin warrior monks traces back to the teachings of Bodhidharma, an Indian monk whose vision changed the course of the temple's history. He not only taught the monks how to protect themselves from dangers like wild animals and bandits, but also introduced martial practices that went beyond mere defense. For Bodhidharma, every movement had a dual purpose: to strengthen the body and cultivate the mind, especially in the challenging mountainous terrain surrounding the temple. Over time, as threats to the monasteries grew, the monks refined their craft, incorporating weapons like staffs and spears into their techniques. It wasn't just about self-defense, it was about protecting the sacred spaces that were the heart of their spirituality. This blend of unwavering courage and technical mastery turned the Shaolin monks into true legends, respected not only for their combat skills, but also for their role in safeguarding their community from external threats. On the ancient borders between cultivated lands and vast steppes, a unique people inhabited the hills. Known to the Chinese as the Rong or Hu since the 7th century BCE, these groups, made up of various tribes, stood out for their combative spirit. Their territory stretched from Hami in the west to Xing'an in the east, occupying lands that bordered the Zhou civilization. Some Russian historians suggest that these tribes might be the ancestors of the Tangut, occupying areas from the upper and middle reaches of the Yellow River to the mountainous regions of Sichuan during the Iron Age. Interestingly, their social structure was centered around a matriarchal system. Women led and gave orders during the day, with men following their instructions. This dynamic only began to shift with the process of Sinicization. Often seen by ancient Chinese as invaders or barbarians, the Rong have a complex and fascinating history. They not only serve as ancestors to the Tangut, but also share historical ties with some Mongol groups and the Xiongnu. A legacy that reflects resilience, adaptation, and transformation over the centuries. Ancient Chinese artists often depicted the Rong and later their Tangut descendants, with features blending Mongolian and Caucasian traits. These representations became more prominent during times of significant territorial expansion. The Tangut, who inherited both the lineage and culture of the Rong, were also deeply influenced by the traditions of Tibetan nomads. This cultural fusion not only shaped their daily practices, but also brought them closer to spiritual philosophies like Zen, which became a key part of their identity. In the 11th and 12th centuries, the Tangut consolidated their power and established themselves as a formidable force. Their influence grew so much that they were able to rival China itself, marking a period of great tension and resistance in the region's history. The Tangut, known for their unmatched bravery and almost superhuman resilience, laid the foundation for a kingdom that stood out in the political and military landscape of its time, the Western Xixia. Rising from the ruins of ancient civilizations, this empire expanded and solidified its influence across vast regions of the Middle Kingdom. However, as with many empires, their peak brought complacency. The warrior spirit that once defined the Tangut people gradually faded. The elite, accustomed to privilege and disconnected from the demands of the battlefield, lost the ability to respond to looming threats. Over time, the lack of significant wars weakened the strength and discipline that had once secured Tangut supremacy. When the invaders arrived, young, determined, and led by the formidable Genghis Khan, the Western Xia was unprepared. In the 13th century, the kingdom fell, and its rulers, descendants of the proud Rong people, were completely wiped out. Thus, one of the most fascinating eras of resistance and power came to an end. In ancient history, a turbulent chapter unfolded amidst seismic changes and tribal conflicts that shaped the region. Long before this, between 1766 and 1122 BCE, the prosperous state of Shanyin, also known as Zhongguo, thrived as a center of power and culture. However, like so many other civilizations of its time, it eventually gave way to the rise of the Zhou tribe. The Zhou kings, known as Wangs beginning with Wu Wang, established a system of granting land and titles to reward the loyalty of their allies. While effective at first, this practice paved the way for corruption and the gradual weakening of central authority. Military life was a cornerstone of society. Men spent years honing their skills to become warriors, while women played essential roles at home, managing sustenance and family organization. However, stability was short-lived. The Zhou state, plagued by internal divisions and constant tribal wars, fragmented into smaller fiefdoms. These battles were devastating. Chronicles from the time describe horrific scenes, with fields and entire cities strewn with corpses after clashes. It was a period of chaos, but also one of transformation, where the foundations of new dynasties were being laid on the ruins of the past. In 260 BCE, one of the most brutal episodes in Chinese military history unfolded in Changping. The Qin army, in a display of cold-blooded and ruthless strategy, captured around 400,000 Zhou soldiers and ordered them to be buried alive. This act of brutality was part of a larger tactic to showcase the Qin's strength, whose military strategy was as effective as it was terrifying. On the front lines, young soldiers launched vigorous attacks, while seasoned veterans maintained a solid defense, forming an almost impenetrable shield even in the most intense battles. At the same time, the Xiongnu, a nomadic warrior people from Central Asia, began appearing in Chinese historical records around the 5th century BCE. Their constant raids pressured the Chinese kingdoms to build fortifications for protection. Over time, these defenses were interconnected, culminating in the creation of the legendary Great Wall of China. By the 3rd century BCE, the Xiongnu reached a new height of power under the leadership of a charismatic Xiongnu. They unified a vast territory stretching from Mongolia to southern Siberia and from Manchuria to the Pamirs. Their army, consisting of an impressive 300,000 mounted archers, was the epitome of agility and skill. These horsemen posed a constant threat to Chinese armies, especially to war chariots, challenging the military conventions of the time with their mobility and precision. The Great Wall, while imposing and strategically vital, wasn't enough to fully secure China's northern borders. The Xiongnu, a persistent enemy, continued to pose a threat. In response, the Chinese adopted a dual approach to dealing with the nomads. They combined diplomacy with marriage alliances in an effort to create bonds that could ease conflicts. These unions not only blended cultural elements, but also symbolized efforts to establish lasting peace. However, by the 50s BCE, the once powerful Xiongnu Empire was facing internal divisions. While some clans accepted Chinese authority, others chose to break away, migrating westward in search of new lands. This movement took them to Central Asia, where Xiongnu influence spread and left a mark on the region's history. Decades later, in 93 CE, a surprising alliance between the Chinese and the Xianbei people faced off against the Xiongnu in the Battle of Yibai, emerging victorious. Then, in 155 CE, an even more decisive event took place when the Xianbei commander Tian Shihai dealt a crushing defeat to the Xiongnu, splitting them into 4 major groups. Each group took a different path. One was integrated into the Xianbei, another sought refuge in China, a third migrated to Tabergay and the Black Sea region, and the last moved further west, reaching areas around the Volga and Don rivers. What's most fascinating about this journey is the cultural and ethnic transformation that occurred along the way. As these groups blended with Turkic and Ugric tribes, a new identity began to emerge. Many historians believe that this fusion of cultures gave rise to the Huns, whose arrival in Europe dramatically shaped history. Did you know that descendants of ancient civilizations still exist today? Nestled in a breathtaking landscape of majestic mountains and secluded valleys around Lugu Lake, at the foot of the Himalayas, lives the fascinating Mosuo tribe. This community challenges conventions with its matriarchal social structure. Women not only lead tribal decisions and manage financial resources, but also inherit and oversee the land, passing this legacy from mother to daughter. It's a system that stands in sharp contrast to many Chinese traditions, where practices like arranged marriages are still common. What makes the Mosuo even more unique is their tradition known as Zuhun, or walking marriage. In this system, young people as early as 13 can receive visits from their partners discreetly, without the formality or legal ties of conventional marriage. A curious custom accompanies this practice. During a nighttime visit, a hook is hung on the door to signal the visitor's presence, avoiding any misunderstandings. Children born from these relationships are raised within the maternal family, surrounded by a network of relatives that provide support and stability. In Mosuo families, entire generations share the same home, with the matriarch, the eldest woman, holding the highest position of respect as the head of the household. While women take on the more demanding responsibilities, men are typically assigned lighter tasks. For decades, efforts to integrate the Mosuo into mainstream Chinese culture have largely failed, thanks to the region's geographic isolation. In the past, reaching the nearest city required a week-long journey, which helped preserve this community's unique traditions. Today, the Mosuo have caught the attention of the Chinese government as a tourist attraction, especially in the Luoxui region. However, the culture showcased to visitors is often a stylized version that doesn't truly reflect the community's authentic way of life. In more remote villages, though, the Mosuo remain true to their customs, passing down their values and practices from one generation to the next. In modern China, it's becoming increasingly rare to find tribes or ethnic groups that manage to preserve their traditional ways of life. Government policies often promote cultural uniformity and discourage practices that deviate from modern standards. This has put pressure on many communities, forcing them to adapt to the demands of modernity and threatening the survival of their cultural identities.